Welcome back to RSA Conference 2021, live from Virtual Broadcast Alley. I am your host, Matt Alderman. Joining me for this segment is Mark Ralls. He is the President and Chief Operating Officer at Acunetics by Invicti. Mark, welcome to the show.
Yeah, welcome. Thank you. It's great to see you again. Sorry that we can't get together in person.
I know. We were just reminiscing about the last time we saw each other, which was at RSA Conference 2020 in San Francisco. Hopefully we get back to those soon. We're going to talk about how to prioritize your web app security. We actually did an interview segment with one of your folks. You guys did a report on kind of the web app vulnerability trends from 2019 to 2020. And what we saw was some drop off in focusing on the web app. We saw some increases in some vulnerabilities. So let's start with a little background on the research that you guys did and kind of the results, because it leads into the rest of the conversation about how do we reprioritize web application security.
Yeah, absolutely. So we, every year we create, as part of Acunetics, our web vulnerability report, and we released that this year for the first time as what we're calling the Invicti AppSec Indicator, which will be a bit of a kind of umbrella publication in which we'll publish all of our research as we go throughout the year. A lot of that will come from Acunetics. Some of that will also come from our sister brand, NetSparker, and we're both under that Invicti umbrella. And so we did a report where we updated our annual, kind of view into an analysis of how our customers are leveraging, Acunetics in order to scan and secure their web assets. And what we saw, over the last, over 2020, I was going to say the last 12 months, but now we're in May already. But over 2020, what we saw was, a bit of a fallback in the level of rigor and discipline and focus around, identifying, remediating, and resolving vulnerabilities. And so, whereas normally we've become accustomed over the years to seeing companies kind of get incrementally better year after year after year in creating a more secure, in kind of securing their web app, threat landscape. 2020 was a step back in many ways. And, what we've discovered, somewhat anecdotally and also somewhat, quantitatively in talking to our customers and surveying our customers is that, there was a lot going on in 2020. I mean, we all know that. But what that really meant, for security pros and what they really had to live through is that, pre-NBA shutdown, right, in January, February, back when we were at RSA and into early March, it was somewhat business as usual, and they're going about their business as normal, and then really all of a sudden overnight, it's, hey, every one of our employees is remote, and we got to make sure we secure endpoints, we stand up, VPNs, we improve VPN throughput and access, and a bunch of related activities that fell on top of that. And all of that really pulled focus and resources away from web application security. But the scary thing is that there's one really important group out there that didn't take their focus off web applications, and that is kind of the criminal element and the black hat hacker element globally, who really viewed this as an opportunity to really double down their focus. And so, the threats haven't diminished, the threats, haven't gotten any lower, but yet the vigilance dropped off a little bit, and it dropped off for a lot of good reasons, right? There's no blame or finger pointing in all this, other than to highlight, something that we see as a concern that organizations really need to get back to and get back to focusing around, because all of the evidence points to the fact that the negative elements that are out there and the negative groups that are out there, they didn't lose focus, and they're still focused there. And so that's a bit of the summary of what we found, through the research.
Yeah, and I read the report. I looked at the report. We actually did an interview on the report, like I said, and we saw this beautiful drop over the last 3-4 years, and then it just kind of went. Ooh, just flatlined in a couple places. I think the most interesting was critical vulnerabilities actually ticked up on the web application side, which means the ones that are most likely to do remote code execution or something like that are the ones that are ticking up. A lot of the other ones stayed pretty flat. We made a little bit of progress in certain places, but again, I think it was focus, right? as you mentioned, focus was, I got to get my employees working from home. I got to get VPNs up. But the other trend that happened last year was we accelerated digital transformation. And this is not going away, which means we're putting more stuff in the cloud. We're spinning up new applications in order to support this new work paradigm, this new consumerization paradigm. And so as we're taking the ball off of web apps, we're also throwing a whole bunch of more web apps into the environment. And so you get this disconnect on focus versus what's actually reality and when it comes to application security.
That's right. And that's another area where you see the kind of natural disconnect that happens when everyone's focused on getting their day jobs done, and you've got the engineering team and the developers, who are all now also remote. And the best way for them to continue to move fast, continue to deliver value for their customers, frankly, to deliver new features and new capabilities that are more important when you're in a remote first world. They're moving heavily to public cloud. They're and really shifting the approach of how they deliver applications and deliver value, while at the same time the security team's just trying to keep everybody safe and trying to make sure everyone can access the network. They're not focused on the fact that hey, a whole bunch of things that used to be within the friendly confines of the network and protected in a certain manner are no longer protected because they're now out in the cloud. And so yeah, it definitely creates a lot of catch up for security teams, and not because they fell down on the job. Again, it's they worked kind of harder and more hours than ever before, but they had a lot more tasks on their plate, a lot more things to focus on. And again, the dev teams are moving as fast as they can. And for many companies, it was the difference between survival and failure. They've got to be able to meet their customers where they are. They've got to continue to deliver a lot of value in a much more budget constrained world. So they had no choice but to move to the cloud and to make that acceleration. But that, again, it just creates a big challenge for security teams to pick up and catch up to where they are. Again, because the world moved very quickly, and it moved very quickly overnight. What we really saw is, based on some of the analysis that I've read, we may have seen a 2 to 4 quarter acceleration in cloud adoption that essentially occurred in a matter of weeks.
Yeah, and the numbers I hear are closer to 12 months acceleration, almost across the board. I mean, most of the interview discussions we've had, we kind of did a year's worth of leap head in 2020, and I think it's just going to continue, right? It was funny last night, we were having a discussion about, I said this, this was going to start to happen 5 years ago, and here we are 5 years later, and we have this big event, this big catalyst that is actually accelerating to the point where we're making up for some lost ground, and this is only going to continue over the next 3 to 4 to 5 years. So I think it's a very interesting dynamic that we have to be cognizant of.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that's happening is that you've got constituencies within a company who were typically skeptical of putting things out in the cloud or making things publicly available. And what's also happened is in their personal life, they shifted really, really heavily in terms of their own activities, what they were willing to do online, and their own online experience. And so they're getting more comfortable with the fact that, just all of these services are online. That's just the way the world works. And so you had, CFOs, and other senior executives who in the old days would have blocked and said, no, there's no way we can put that in the cloud, who are now have really made a leap in their own understanding of the cloud and the security of the cloud, and are allowing more things to move, which again, that genie doesn't go back in the bottle.
Nope.
Right. We're moving from a world where you have to justify using the cloud to and I think we've already moved to this world where you really now have to justify why are you not in the cloud.
Yeah, as everybody says, it's the new normal. So my question is, Mark, how do we get people back on track, right? Because we had the lost year. I call it the lost year because this is the best way to describe it. In some respects, we had the lost year. So how do we get teams and organizations to get back on track and really start to bring those vulnerability counts back down and make progress again?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's really two components to this that from my perspective and our perspective. I think one of those is more of a tactical and a technical perspective, and that is you've got to bring and implement best-in-class tooling, You've got to have automation. You've got to be able to, discover applications, which, by the way, is a feature we just launched in Acunetics earlier this year. Application discovery. You've got to be able to robustly scan them. You've got to have great integrations, into your ticketing systems. Getting things over to your developers, showing them, proof of exploit, all things that Acunetics does very, very well, so that you are, able to really close that gap between very accelerated release cycles and remediation. And so that's one element. We can kind of get into that and talk about that. But there's a whole other element, which is around incentives and motivations, and making sure that as a security professional, am I doing a good job of educating, my executive suite as to why this isn't a necessary evil, but it's actually a firm requirement of doing business. Mm-hmm. And really there's kind of the other big shoe that dropped from our perspective in 2020. You had all of the disruption as part of COVID, but then you had SolarWinds happen late in the year. And what we've really seen is just a complete sea change in the way enterprises are looking at evaluating their vendors. And so a lot of Acunetics customers are small and medium-sized businesses or mid-market businesses that are selling into larger enterprises, and those larger enterprises are applying a degree of scrutiny that we've frankly never even seen before, as they try to avoid kind of the next supply chain attack. And so a lot of small and medium-sized businesses that have never really thought about consistent, continuous automated web app security, they're now having to do that and prove that as part of the procurement process. And if they're able to show that better than the competing vendors in the space, that can make the difference in which tool is selected, which vendor is selected. And so there's really kind of this two-pronged approach. There's if I'm leading a security team, there's how do I help my team catch up? What tools do they need? What automation do they need? How can I get a force multiplier? Because I'm not, especially in this job market right now, I'm not going to be able to hire everyone I need. And then there's the other hand, which is how do I then justify this and justify the budgets, the expenditure, the focus that we need from the organization. But if it means we can win more deals, which now more than any time in my career, it really does make the difference between who's going to win that deal, you or the next competitor over. Security has so elevated in the eyes of purchasing departments, legal departments, at enterprises, that it really is a chance to differentiate yourself. So it really is. It's how do you manage both aspects of it, of how you get the job done, but then really how do you create that sense of urgency within your company? Yeah,
I mean, security as a competitive advantage is real in this environment. But let's go to the first point, because I think you mentioned a couple things that I think are big challenges for organizations because our arms around. Asset discovery, right? Website discovery. The ability to understand what is being pushed out from the development teams is always been this really big challenge in the industry. And the first start is, look, I have to discover it. I have to know it's there. Then I have to build some automation around scanning and being able to bring this in. And the point I want to make here is, outside of the discovery piece, the frequency of what we need to be scanning at is completely different. I've spent a lot of time in the vulnerability management days. Mm-hmm. If I could get somebody to scan their entire network monthly or quarterly, we thought that was good. In the application security world, we're talking daily or multiple times a day. And I think it's this frequency that is going to create some challenges for organizations unless they have some good discovery and automation capabilities in place.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And this is one of the things that, for a lot of, folks that we talk to who are in leadership positions today, who started their careers when, you and I started our careers, it was the annual pen test was kind of the rite of passage, and that's what everyone wanted to see. And that is, that's a concept that really needed to die, 10 years ago. It was probably still alive 2 or 3 years ago. It is dead now, dead and buried and gone. I mean, it's the network changes so fast. With containerization, with just the way in which we are provisioning and deploying applications, there are so many changes that occur and that can occur on a near constant basis, on top of the fact that in order to stay competitive in this world, many many of our customers are really fully bought in around continuous delivery, and they, for some of them, daily, doing daily releases and daily builds is kind of old news. And they're like you said, they're moving, really just at the speed of business at this point. And so, the idea of an annual pen test is just laughable, as is the idea of a quarterly or even a monthly. I mean, it really is about that continuous scanning, continuous alerting. There may have been a config change that was pushed yesterday. That something that was not exploitable yesterday is now exploitable today, and there may not have been a release, or there was a release and maybe a config change too, and those things are interacting in a way that's negative and is creating a vulnerability. And so, just always being active, constantly scanning, constantly looking for issues is more important than ever before. And I think the other thing that we're seeing is it's not all about your kind of crown jewel applications, the ones that have the most eyes and focus. It really is about anything that can really kind of submit data into your infrastructure. And a lot of the highest profile breaches we've seen have been really peripheral, forgotten, orphaned, abandoned applications. And this is true both at very large companies and at very small companies. So you really need discovery, because we have yet to encounter a customer who wasn't surprised by the things that came back as part of discovery. Right? It's routine that we're finding 30% more websites or more web applications than they realized existed or were still out there. And so you kind of combine these two facets, and there's no way for a human team to keep up, much less catch up. Right, given the fact that we lost some ground in 2020.
So some recommendations there. I mean, are you literally continuously doing discovery for your corporate networks? I mean, is that the guideline? And then from a scanning perspective, is it no more than daily? I mean, what are we seeing trend-wise? Because like I said, new stuff's coming up all the time. And your point was, also, code change multiple times. What if there's a vulnerability in an open source component that just happened to get released, right? So what are some of those recommendations? Discover continuously and scan at no worse than once a day? I mean, is that what we're seeing now?
That's definitely the way the world is going, and not every company is there or necessarily needs to be there tomorrow, right? Although probably the day after tomorrow, they all need to be there. But no, it's really the way the world going. It's where because of the evolution of threats, and you brought up open source components. It's a remarkably high percentage of applications that ship today with open source components, something like 80+%. And not only do you have to understand the security of that open source component, but you also have to understand that, what did your developers do as they integrated that open source component into your application? And is there some way that even if that open source component is secure, the way in which it's integrated may or may not be secure? And so there's getting to daily scanning. And here's the, some of the conversations that we'll have with our customers, with our prospects are like, wow, like, how do you expect us to be able to do this? And we're like, well, we don't. That's actually not your problem. That's our problem, right? And so that's the beauty of leveraging a tool like Acunetics. Where there is the ability, where you're able to kind of go in and select your frequency of discovery, you select your frequency of scanning, and select what's going to trigger your scans in the event that you do want to scan more frequently. If you're doing more frequent releases than daily, being able to leverage that and provide that. We've got customers that are saying, oh yeah, maybe that's something that we'll get to in a quarter or in a year, and we're saying, well, why don't you just turn on? Because you could just do that now, right? And you could get much more secure now. And again, that's where we say you really got to give those force multiplying tools to your teams in order to catch up and then to keep up, with the evolving threat landscape. Because again, there's this question of like, oh, that seems like a ton of investment. Well, when you implement a tool like Acunetics, you're making that investment. It automatically gives you the ability to stay up to date and to do daily scanning, which you may not need, but most of our customers are surprised when they actually go in and discover, the pace at which there are config changes, the pace at which there are new builds and new releases. It's a lot faster than a lot of people are really thinking about it on a daily basis.
Yeah, I mean, that visibility is so important because it ties to your second point, which is if I'm going to use security as a differentiator, as a competitive advantage, I have to be able to show the results. The previous segment, Al and I were talking about third party and improve it, right? I mean, you got to think about the ability to have the visibility, a plan to attack it, but then you're going to have to show proof. If you're going to use security as a competitive differentiator, you better have the results to show it. Otherwise, the second part of what you just described is not going to happen.
That's right, and that's where we've invested quite a bit in terms of our reporting capabilities, and really where Acunetics is one of the market leaders in that regard. I would like to say the market leader, but I try to be properly modest. It's we've got just a tremendous amount of reporting that's available to meet very specific needs of different industry segments, different verticals, and also just very executive friendly reports. And one of the things that we consistently hear back from customers and get a lot of positive feedback about when we conduct NPS surveys and other interviews with our customers to understand what's working and what's not, is just how valuable they find those executive level reports, not just with their own executives, but also, again, when they're using security as a source of competitive advantage, when they're in a contentious deal cycle, when they're going through a procurement review, and to be able to say, okay, well, this is what this is the executive summary report put together by our AppSec tool, and here's our kind of clean bill of health, in that regard, and that has really gone a long way and had a big impact on those procurement cycles in terms of shortening them, and again, increasing their odds of winning the deal against their competitors who may not have similar tooling or similar reports available.
Yeah, I mean, all important components. You can't say you do it. You got to prove that you can do it. If you can leverage automation to do it and put yourself in an advantage to win, then the mid-size, even the large enterprises, everybody wins at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And again, it's remarkable how quickly and how thoroughly the world changed post SolarWinds, and how much that is driving just a level of scrutiny again that we've never seen before. And this is true, what our customers expect us to deliver, but also what our customers are delivering to their customers and to the enterprises that they serve. And so, really being able to get ahead of that and being prepared, we hear time and time again, is such a source of advantage. It helps, speed up deal cycles. And again, we've had a lot of CISOs who said, like, I never thought, the chief revenue officer would be a big fan of mine. But thanks to you guys, we're helping them, accelerate sales cycles, and that's earning me credibility and it's earning me budget, that I just don't know how I'd be able to get to elsewhere, otherwise.
Yeah, that's great. Mark, thank you so much for joining us on Security Weekly.
No, really enjoyed it, Matt. Thanks so much.
If anybody wants to learn more, please visit securityweekly.com/Acunetics. That's the end of our micro interviews, but stay tuned. Enterprise Security Weekly is coming up this evening.